So I'm going to tell you an interesting fact I haven't told anybody yet. So you're going to be the first one to hear it. I generally, and this is what it's still in my presentation, I always talk about how many deals I average per year, right? I generally average about 40 deals per year, which is not a lot. And I talk about why it's the way it is. Well, I just recently closed out my books for 2019. I only did 14 deals in 2019, 14. Wow. But my profit after everything was over $350,000.
Wow, man.
Think about the math. I mean, I used to do there was times where I was doing close to 100 deals a year and I didn't make 350,000.
Right.
I said, I only did 14 deals last year. 14. That's it. I mean, that's nothing. People do 14 a month. 14 deals is nothing. And that's what I did for the entire year. And it was over $350,000 in profit. And that's
awesome.
One profit center. You know, that's not wholesaling is just a small part of what I do. But I mean, one profit center, and 14 is not a lot. People are like, I want to do 50 deals, 80 deals. I want to do 20 deals a month and all these crazy numbers. I'm like, don't worry about how many deals. Worry about how much you make.
Hey, everyone. Jamel Gibbs here. Welcome to another podcast episode. Today, we have another special guest, and we're going to talk about a topic that I'm willing to bet no one has ever heard about, and it's because Scott made this verbiage up. I've known Scott for several years now. We were on the speaking circuit together doing events under the same company. And I got to tell you, Scott is an awesome, awesome guy. And he has a unique approach to real estate investing. And I think you guys are going to love what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about not only getting deals, but we're going to talk about how Scott executes those deals and how he sets things up in order to think about the future. And also, I don't know if Scott wants me to talk about this or not, but I will. Scott has a unique approach when it comes to the mentality of material things within your real estate investing business. For example, he told me one time he was driving I believe, what did you say, $110,000 car or something like that?
Yeah, I used to have a Cadillac XLR convertible.
Yeah, so very expensive car. And then he noticed that everyone that was lending him money was driving a Honda Accord. And if Scott talks about that during the course of this particular podcast, now I'd actually like for you to share that. But for the most part, that was an interesting approach. And it was counterintuitive to what everyone else thinks success is all about. I love that. A Honda Accord versus Cadillac. And you think about it and you look at, you know, what the private money lenders are driving and then match that. I mean, it should tell you who has the money and who doesn't, right? So something I definitely wanted to talk about today. Scott, what's up, man?
What's up? What's up? Happy to be here. Good to see you, Jamel.
Likewise, man. So you're in Virginia, the next state over. I actually got to come out and see you again, man. It's been a little while, but I appreciate you jumping on this podcast and be willing to share this information today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. So why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself, how you got started in real estate, and then we'll dive right into the meat and potatoes.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you the short version so that you're not here till 6 p.m. tonight. But so I originally, you know, I'm aging myself, but I originally started buying houses back when there was non-qualifying assumptions. If you may or may not remember them, they ended them in 1987 for FHA and 89 for VA. And what that meant was anybody can take over the mortgage legally through the bank. And you just had to pay out the seller their equity. So I started buying in 94. My very first house I bought to live in. I was a landscaper at the time, and I bought it to live in. It was $5,000 down, take over payments. And then shortly after I moved in, another house came for sale on the block. It said $2,000 down, take over payments. Now, I had no interest in real estate, but now I started feeling like I got ripped off. And again, I know in hindsight, this doesn't make any sense. But at the time, I was like, damn, I just paid $5,000. This one's only $2,000. So my genius brain said, well, if I buy that one too, then it's like $3,500 each. So it was a better deal. So I bought the second house and I put a tenant in it, paying about the same amount that I was paying in a payment. It was $675 back then. And my mortgage was about $675. And that's what really started me thinking about real estate. I was constantly thinking, I owe this money, but they're paying for it. I borrow the money, they're paying it off. And then I always joke and say I came up with my McDonald's plan, which the McDonald's plan was I can buy $1 million worth of property and I can go work at McDonald's for 30 years and I'll be a millionaire. And that was I'm a high school dropout. That was my simple brain processing someone else paying off these houses. I was like, well, let me just buy them and wait out time. And that was a good plan. And I was well on my way. I got to about 20 properties. I started in 94, got to about 20 properties by about 2000. And then in 2001, I accidentally wholesaled my first house. And by accidentally, I mean, I contracted a house that it was a regular it was not a non-qualifying assumption. It was a cash deal. I planned on rehabbing it. It was $22,000. I needed 10 grand to rehab it. It was a great deal. So I had no money though. I started going to all these private lenders, going to these local REIAs and trying to solicit the funds, and everybody turned me down. And then I only had 30 days to close. About 2 weeks into it, one of the lenders called me back and he told me, I won't loan you the 32 grand, but I'll buy it from you for 32 grand. And I remember kind of laughing and I'm like, I'd love to sell it to you, but I don't own it. Sorry. And he was like, don't worry about it. My lawyer, I do this all the time. My lawyer will take care of everything. No big deal. So I went and signed some papers and didn't even know what the hell I signed. Obviously I know now, but at the time I didn't know. And then about 2 weeks later, they called me back and said, your check is ready for pickup. And I went in and it was a check for $10,000. First money I made. I've been in real estate 7 years, had 20 properties, and I've just been feeding them. Deal went bad on me. I'm trying to get out of the contract and I made $10,000. So that kind of shifted my whole focus to, I don't have to wait 30 years to make money in real estate. I can make money right now. And I've been doing it basically full time ever since. I realized, we can make money doing real estate right now. So I've never looked back. So I've gotten into everything, rentals, wholesale, rehabs. I did hundreds of rehabs. I did building new construction. I'm going to tell you, I know you're limited on time here, but I'm going to tell you. So I got to about 84 properties. I'm going to tell you the bad with it as well. So I got to about 84 properties, and I was crushing it. I mean, wholesaling, rehab, and everything, we were just crushing it. I had 84 rentals on the old model. And I'm prefacing this to tell you why I believe in the new model now. And I was making a ton of money. I had just about $1 million in cash saved. It was just on top of the world. And then 2007 came, and you guys all know what happened then. So overnight.
Happened to all of us, man.
And when I say overnight, I mean overnight, out of my 84 properties, probably 30 to 35 of them stopped paying. Because although we were crushed in real estate, everybody was crushed in every industry. People were losing their jobs, so it didn't matter what you were in. The economy was bad, and people were crushed. So I had about 35, 40 of them stop paying overnight. I had mortgages on all of them. The houses that I rehabbed, I had contracts to sell. The banks were shutting down left and right. Every day, banks were shutting down. So we're pending closing. We're like, if I can just make it till Wednesday, we're going to get this money. The bank would go out of business. And now we got to start the process all over. So it was devastating. So in the end, I lost about 50 properties to foreclosure, which is tough on anybody, but it's especially tough on a guy whose business was, we stop foreclosure, right? So it was really tough. So 2007 to mid 2008, I didn't make a dollar, showed up to work every day and had nothing to do other than watch my money go out the window. I ended up with zero. I had all that money and I paid every month the deficit on my rentals, trying to fight the good fight. When the money ran out, I lost the houses. So then, 2009 to late 2008, 2009, we started rebuilding. The market was good at the time because we're like plummeted. Well, I started doing stuff different. At that time, I started paying attention to who did well in the bust. Who, like you just said, we all lost our ass. We all lost. Well, not everybody did. So almost everybody I knew did. We all got crushed, and a lot of people never came back. They went back to their jobs, and they won't look at real estate anymore. They're like, no, I tried it. It doesn't work, right? So a lot of them never came back, so it thinned the herd. But on top of that, some people flourished during the bust. And so I started paying attention, and I was like, what did they do different? Why is this guy crushing it? And now it's 2009 and stuff's on sale for 30% and he's buying all he can. And we're just trying to be able to pay our bills. So I started paying attention. And one of the big things that I noticed, and I always can hear people's thoughts, it goes against the grain of what everyone teaches. But one of the big things I noticed is that they owned all their crap free and clear.
Yep.
We were all taught, I know I was, and I know, I'm guessing you were, and pretty much every seminar out there still teaches it. They were all taught the leverage model. And go out and refi, pull out that cash. It's tax-free, pull out the equity. It's dead equity if you don't use it, right? All this stuff, I've heard it 100 times. And then use it to buy more, and then take that equity out and use it to buy more. And it all makes perfect sense on paper until it doesn't work, in which case everything's a house of cards. And so I started paying close attention to what they did different, and I revamped everything. So now I live a completely different life. You started talking about it earlier. So I live a life now to where my mortgage is just about paid off. It'll be paid off probably within 4 months of my house. I have no car payments. I have no credit card payments. I have no debt whatsoever. And so I don't have any stress anymore. I'd still turn gray, but that's my son. But I don't have any stress anymore. I don't have to come up with crazy money. It got to a point where I had to come up with 25 grand a month just to be at zero, just to pay the overhead. And I'm like, so that, that's a lot you have to do every month just to be at zero. That's no extra money. That's just to be at zero. And now, I mean, I could, if I decide I don't want to work for a month or 2 months or 6 months, I don't have to. I have enough coming in, and it's just a whole different world than what I used to do. And I used to be the opposite as far as, like you were saying, fancy cars and all kinds of expensive stuff and all this stuff. Now, I still spend a lot of money, mind you, but what I spend it on is vacations. I might spend 100 grand a year on vacations. I probably spend 30 grand a year just going to Mississippi State games because my son loves them. And I'm okay with that. For experiences, I'll spend money on, but I'll buy my jeans on sale, and
you know what, man? That's a great point, because a lot of people, people jump into especially when you got things like Instagram and stuff like that. Everybody wants to be rich and they're really broke. But it's funny because a lot of people come into this business with a monetary value in their mind. What they fail to realize is that money, when I was down on Wall Street, they used to say this: money is nothing but a tool that allows you to experience things. So if you want to go to the moon, it'll cost you a couple $1,000,000 to go to the moon. You want to travel the world, here's how much it's going to cost. Money provides experiences. That's all money is. And the more, obviously the more money you have, the more experiences you can have at the same time. So I love the fact that you said that, you'll spend 30 grand a year on going to a Mississippi State game because it's an experience,
right?
Or $100,000 a year on vacations because it's an experience. But it's not like going out and buying material things. I love that, man.
Yeah, so I think you alluded to it earlier. So I used to borrow hard money for, flipping houses, and I would constantly be, I had 2 Cadillac Escalades, and I had a Cadillac XLR convertible, and I loved it. I mean, it was my baby. And I would go to pick up checks from my lenders, and they were always either in a Ford F-150 or a Honda Accord. And I'm driving up in this nice car, and they'll look at it and kind of smile. Oh, nice car. But in their heads, they're probably thinking, you schmuck. Why you're borrowing from me at these ridiculously high rates is because they're putting their money out to work, and I'm putting my money in a car. It doesn't make any sense. But I didn't see it at the time. At the time, I was like, no, I need more money. I'll just go do another deal. And that was all great until there was no more deals.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I still owed all that money. And so afterwards, I changed everything. I mean, I tell people all the time, I say, guess what I drive now? I drive a Honda Accord, and I'm committed to it. I started in 2013 on my first Honda Accord. I'm on my second one now. And I'm like, that's it. I go in with a check and leave with the car. I don't have to fill anything out. I don't have to do any of that stuff. My wife has a Lexus, but I brought in a check when I bought it, $55,000, and I just pay for it. I'm not doing any financing. I'm not paying any interest on anything.
Love it.
And I have to be that way because that's the only way I'm okay with it anymore. If I can't write a check for it, I don't want it.
I love it, man.
To take it back to houses. So, and I know I'm jumping all over the place, Jamel, so stop me if you need to.
No, this is good, man.
But houses, people naturally say, because I believe in free and clear houses, and we can argue to the end of the earth on all the reasons it's bad to have free and clear properties. So I believe in free and clear properties, but the natural thing someone will say is, well, that's great, but I don't have $3 million to go buy properties or $10 million to go buy properties. I get it. So I still do borrow money to buy houses, but what's different is I pay them off as quickly as possible. I have a saying I tell my coaching partners, and that is, you do not deserve to take 1 cent from your properties until they're free and clear. Once they're free and clear, now they're yours and they'll pay you forever. But until they're free and clear, they're not even yours. You work for the bank.
I'm going to tell you something, man. So I you came to one of my events a couple years ago, and in turn I came to yours out in Virginia Beach. And I got to tell you, man, since then you spoke about that slow flip model, which we'll talk about today. I incorporated some of that recently into a couple of creative deals that I'm doing. In fact, one of them should be paid off next year. But we're collecting $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
And I've only owned it for, it's going to be 2 years. When we purchased that property, my intentions were to pay it off within 2 years, and then we collect on it for the next 10
forever.
years.
Yeah.
So, and that's $1,000 a month coming in from one property, free and clear.
Yep.
So I love that business model, man. So let's talk about slow flips for a little bit. How can the average, first of all, how are you finding your deals right now?
So direct mail, well, there's a couple different ways. So wholesaling, there's two different businesses we're really in here. So, so I do local events, I do local training, coaching, all that stuff. And so I work with a lot of local people who are doing wholesales and slow flips. So for the wholesale business, there's different marketing than for the slow flip business. So I'll touch on both of them. So for wholesaling, we do everything. We do all the guerrilla marketing, but our mass deals come from direct mail and from the internet, same as probably the whole rest of the country. It's crushing right now. My coaching students for the month of January have $284,000 in wholesale fees on the board. That's only between 9 people, $284,000 in wholesale fees.
That's fantastic, man.
But it's consistency. They're all spending money every month, $1,000. And I know $1,000 doesn't sound like a lot. I used to spend up to $15,000 a month, but they're doing it consistently. And because they have such a small business, this is where people screw up when they scale. I'm against scale, if you hadn't noticed. When you're small, you can do one deal and make 20, 30 grand, and that money's yours. When you scale, like I used to do, I used to have $25,000 a month. 15 was just marketing. Before I made $1, I had to come up with 25. So you do deals and it's no more excitement. The money just goes in the account to pay the overhead.
Right. You got to pay your team and all of that stuff. That's right.
Yeah. And if you have a month where you don't close anything, next month you got to do 50,000 to break even on last month. Yeah. And before you know it, you're just chasing. You have this big business and all these employees and you're doing all these deals. And the stuff people brag about, oh, I'm the biggest wholesaler. I do more deals than anyone. Yeah. And they may, not putting them down. They may do more deals. It doesn't mean they're making more money. Right. In the end, this is where people get confused, especially in real estate. Everybody brags on how many deals you do. How many deals did you do? How many deals do you do? Screw the amount of deals you do. How much money are you making? Are you making money? Because I know people that do 100 deals, and they're making 100 grand a year. I'm like, really?
It doesn't make any sense. I mean,
because they have all these deals and other families they're taking care of. It's ridiculous. I'm like, you did 100 deals and they only made 100 grand. I'm making 130 grand. I'm like, it's ridiculous.
So how many people do you have on your team at the moment? 0. Just
it's me. Well, my wife works with me, but she stays at home. She answers the phone though for my byline. But yeah, it's just me.
It's funny because I only have right now at this point, I got a couple of VAs answering the calls, but I literally just had a conversation with my virtual assistant. We were making offers over the phone, and I wanted to make that transition back into my old school model. Initially, I was just talking to a couple of other guys who had me on. They featured me on their podcast, and my goal was to do $6 million this year. I don't even have that goal anymore. When I did the numbers, I sat down and worked the numbers out. At the end of the day, I can bring home a lot more money if I stayed small. So it's interesting that you're talking about this because, majority of that money was going to go out on overhead anyway.
So I'm going to tell you an interesting fact I haven't told anybody yet. So you're going to be the first one to hear it. I generally, and this is what it's still in my presentation, I always talk about how many deals I average per year, right? I generally average about 40 deals per year, which is not a lot. And I talk about why it's the way it is. Well, I just recently closed out my books for 2019. I only did 14 deals in 2019, 14. Wow. But my profit after everything was over $350,000.
Wow, man.
Think about the math. I mean, I used to do there was times where I was doing close to 100 deals a year and I didn't make $350,000.
Right.
I said, I only did 14 deals last year. 14. That's it. I mean, that's nothing. People do 14 a month. 14 deals is nothing. And that's what I did for the entire year. And it was over $350,000 in profit. And that's
awesome.
One profit center. That's not wholesaling is just a small part of what I do. But I mean, one profit center, and 14 is not a lot. People are like, I want to do 50 deals, 80 deals. I want to do 20 deals a month and all these crazy numbers. I'm like, don't worry about how many deals. Worry about how much you make.
That's right. I love it, man. That's a if you guys are listening to this right now and obviously there's a lot of guys out there doing a lot of deals, and it can be impressive. It can seem impressive, but what's more impressive is how much money you're actually bringing home. So you hit the nail right on the head with that, man.
So I listen to a lot of podcasts too, as I'm sure you do. And your listeners, I'm sure they're listening to this, so they listen to others as well. I almost hear the exact opposite on all of them. Everybody talks about scaling. How do we scale your business? How do you hire people, hire a buyer, hire a seller, hire a coordinator? And everybody's talking about scaling. And every time I hear it, I'm just like, no, you don't have to. Now, some people want to, and if you want to, have at it. That's your business. Right. I have no desire whatsoever.
Less headaches, man.
Make money, not to have a huge machine working.
I love it, man. Counterintuitive to what popular belief is. So right now, you you don't have a virtual assistant. You don't have a team. Obviously, you have an office, but you're still doing a lot of a profit. Not even a lot of deals, but your majority of it is profit in your business because you don't have anybody to pay.
Right. Correct.
Awesome.
I make a check and it's mine.
That's
you know,
right.
I used to say, I deposit it, it goes into the black hole. It didn't matter if it was 20, 30, 50 grand. I deposited it and it was enough to cover the bills. It went into the black hole. Now it's mine.
That's
like
right, man.
When I started.
Now, how many hours a day are you working on your business at the moment?
You know, it's hard to define work because I go to work every day.
Yeah.
You know, so I probably leave my house at 10-ish. I get up real early, but I do some stuff from home. But it's hard to define what work is because then I come to the office, and if I don't have an appointment, I'm more or less hanging out in the office. I got people to come and go, and I got a lot of coaching students that I work with. But work on this business, you know, basically it's almost not at all. When I have an appointment, I go on the appointment, and then it's all just a matter of texting to sell them. So I don't spend a whole lot of, like, if we're talking about the wholesale business, I don't work on it much at all.
Gotcha.
My slow flip business, I work on almost not at all. I have a system set up for that. My coaching business is where I put my time in. Mostly that's the bulk of my time goes into my coaching business.
So how do you manage, you know, let's dig into this a little bit. So how do you manage to do, let's say, even 14 deals? Let's say the average person listening to this podcast right now, how would they manage to copy what you're doing? How can they go out and even average one deal a month? You know, if you do the math, if you did 14 deals last year, that means you made what, 30 grand per deal?
So let me tell you, that wouldn't be fair for me to answer. And well, I'm going to answer it, but it's not fair to your listeners to say that you go out and do it.
You've been around for a while.
That's why. So I pretty much quit. The bulk of my time goes toward my coaching business. You know, I do trainings and I do coaching business, and I do deals with them. And I didn't count those deals. We do a lot of deals with my coaching students, but I didn't count those. So I pretty much don't do any marketing anymore, like zero. When I say zero, I mean zero, except for my website. I still have my website up because it's $99 a month, and I generate a lot of deals from it. So I do no marketing. That's why I get to keep all my money. I have no staff. I have no marketing. But I've been doing this. I started buying in 1994. So it's a long time I've been in business. So I get so many referrals that are just from people that know me. And because I'm doing the training business, I'm even more known.
Yeah.
People know, you know, from the radio and from Facebook and all this other stuff. So people say, oh, I saw you, blah, blah, blah. My aunt has a house she wants to sell. And I didn't do any marketing for the buying houses. I did marketing for the seminar, but I still end up buying houses from it.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that. A couple of years ago, I had a guy walk into one of my seminars. He said, look, I'm not here. I have absolutely no desire to be in a real estate business, but I have a couple $1,000,000 and I want to lend it to you. He walked right into one of my events and came up to me after the event and became a private money lender. So
fantastic.
This is kind of funny, man. So it is beneficial to have a platform like this where you can work.
And that's why I say it's not fair to tell your students or your listeners as to, well, how could you duplicate this? Because it's not, I'm not even trying to do it because I'm pretty much working on the other business. This is just something extra because, you know, the deals come in, obviously I'm going to do them.
That's right, man. So no marketing at all and was able to do 14 deals. And imagine if you tried.
So let's talk about my students, though, because that's a number that your people can duplicate. On average, my students spend $1,000 per month.
Okay.
We try and keep that as the minimum. A few of them spend $2,000 a month. Most spend $1,000.
Postcards.
Direct mail, we do it through a service called Velocity Marketing. So we do it through a service where they all do it collectively. On top of that $1,000, some of them still do bandit signs. We still do a lot of different things, billboard cards, guerrilla cards. They all still have websites that we market. I'm very big into YouTube videos for getting SEO ranked because it's free and it's incredible how well it works. I'm always shocked that people don't utilize YouTube. It's owned by Google and you link your website and it's incredible how well it works. So they average about $1,000 a month plus some legwork on the additional little things. And
you said all old school guerrilla marketing stuff, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
And they're doing really well as well. So they're not doing a deal every month, mind you, but they're doing big deals. So, you know, my biggest one of my students, my biggest one on the board right now is 55,000, but there's one at 52,000. Then there's 29,000, 25,000, 24,000, 20,000, 18,000. And then there's a 4, a 7, and an 8. So there's some smaller ones, but they're bigger deals. They don't have to do a lot of deals. These, you know, most of my coaching students are full-time and they have jobs. And so they don't have to do a lot of deals. They can do one deal every 2 or 3 months and triple their job income or double it, you know.
I
It's
mean, you think about that. That one student that did 55,000, even if, he did 4 of those a year, I mean, he's looking at over 200,000 bucks in profit, man. So
yeah,
that's fantastic, man.
yeah.
So they're all doing guerrilla marketing, and obviously the slow flip process is a little different. They're buying these houses at what in your market, 70 cents on the dollar minus repairs?
65. We try and do 65 because as a wholesaler, we need to resell them at 70 to 72%.
Right.
So we try and buy 65 unless based on situation, we can buy significantly lower.
And how many leads is it taking to come in? Let's just say, I know your numbers.
On average, it takes about 20 leads to buy a house.
That's it. 20 offers.
Sometimes 20 leads can buy 5 houses, and then sometimes 60 leads will buy 0. Right. So on average, it's about 20 leads to buy a house.
Now, when we say leads, we're talking about offers, right?
Correct. Well, people that want to sell their house, I consider a lead.
Right.
Sometimes we get, I can't count calls because you get a lot of calls screaming and yelling, take me off your list. So I don't count those as leads. Yep. But actual leads, it takes about 20. That's
the same thing here in my market. And I'm seeing those numbers nationwide with the coaching students that I work with as well, man. The problem that a lot of people face, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of people don't make enough offers, and that's why it just doesn't work. They don't do the necessary things to get the phone ringing in the first place. So if you spend $1,000 a month, generally speaking, you should get close to, that 20 offers per month. In order to make a deal.
If you're also doing the other marketing as well.
Right.
So the biggest problem, and we said that's an average, right? You got to do 20 deals to 20 offers, 20 leads to get a deal. Well, the biggest problem is it might not be your first 20. It might not be your second 20. How many people quit?
A lot,
How many people quit? And I mean, that's my job as a coach, is to keep you from quitting. That's my biggest job, is to keep you from quitting. Because I know if you stay in it, you're going to win.
That's right.
However, people are like, well, I spent $1,000 last month and $1,000 the month before, and I still didn't get anything. And there's nothing you can really tell them other than stick with it. You got to stick with it because it will come. But you don't get a refund on the months you didn't get anything. However, the other thing is oftentimes 3, 6, 9 months from now, you'll close a deal from last month's marketing where you didn't get anything.
It snowballs.
But you got to be in the business to get to that 3, 6, 9 months from now.
That's right. I tell people all the time, Scott.
People from quitting.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, give yourself, think about not making any money for 6 months and give yourself a fair marketing budget. I don't care if it's 500. I like $1,000 a month for my coaching students, but some of them just can't do $1,000 a month. So it may take them a little longer. So I tell them, look, at the end of the day, you have to be willing to commit to at least 6 months of marketing and act like you're not going to make a dime. I'm not saying it's going to take 6 months to get a deal, but if you really want to reap the benefits of this, you have to remember you're working with people who don't know you, and you're asking them to sell their biggest asset to you at a discount.
Right.
How many people are gonna, how many people are gonna want to do that? So you got to be willing to, number one, hang in there. You're gonna need that stick-to-itiveness, and at the end of the day, if you hang in there, eventually those numbers that you're putting out, that marketing that you're putting out, and the calls that come in becomes a snowball. You gain that snowball effect from it, and eventually it just turns into multiple deals for you. So the key is to just stick with it. You got to stick with it at the end of the day.
And people say, oh, that's easy for you to say. You're not the one spending $1,000 a month or whatever they're spending. But the reality is you have to, that's the only way to get there, is you have to stay doing it consistently.
That's it, man. So you have 2 different marketing channels, 2 different types of deals that you're working right now. So let's talk about the slow flips a little bit, the marketing channels for that.
Should I get into what's a slow flip, or just how the marketing works first? Or
let's talk about what a slow flip is for those who don't know what it is.
So I'm going to give you the short version, but a slow flip, in my definition, I always say a slow flip is the selling a house as slowly as possible for the fastest possible path to wealth. And I'm talking wealth, not making a $10,000 or $20,000 assignment fee, but wealth. And so slow flip, the way we work it is we buy the low end, the highest of the low end housing, and every market is different. So I don't know where you guys are watching from. They're not available in every area. Excuse me. I know where you live, Jamel. There are areas out there you can do it.
I do it.
You do it. So up and down the East Coast, most areas there are. If you go Midwest, there's tons of areas. You can't do it, obviously, like a place like Long Island, for instance. If you live on Long Island, you need to invest outside of your market, because the cheapest house there is going to be $300,000-$400,000. So it's going to be a challenge. So what we do is we buy very inexpensive houses. And I hate to even say the number because I know it's a broad market who listens. So my book on Amazon, I have one negative review, and his negative review was that my numbers are unrealistic. You can never find a house for those numbers. And I'm like, well, yes, we do. So we try and max out on these slow flips at $30,000. And there's a reason for the 30, and I'll explain to you in a second. So we buy them at $30,000 or less, occasionally over, but if we do, we try and pay out the difference over the 30, and I'll explain to you why. We borrow private money, not hard money, but we borrow private money that's amortized. So it's not 6 months or 12 months and you have a balloon. It's amortized. You have a monthly payment every month for 5 years, and then it's free and clear. So we pay 12% interest, mind you, 12%. And again, everybody's like, why do you pay so much? You can get it for cheaper. When you do such a short-term amortization, do it on your own amortization calculator. It's minimal, the difference. However, to get a lender and you tell them they're paying 12%, lenders are lined up to do the funding. So we borrow the money, the full money, 30 grand for 5 years at 12%. Then immediately, so we buy the house right now. I have it funded. I got no money out of pocket, right? So
you said you're paying 10%?
12%.
12%. Okay.
It makes my payments $667.33.
Right.
So the reason we don't go over 30, and that's what I was going to get into in a second, is because if I go over 30, it makes it so we would be negative cash flow. And I never want to have anybody get into negative cash flow. So we try and cap out at 30, but immediately, this is the trick to it now. So we buy this house, somebody else funded it. So I got this house with no money. Immediately I sell it with owner financing. So I bought it for 30. I sell them on average at $89,000. $89,000 at $875 a month, but for 30 years.
Right.
You with me? So I bought it for 5-year mortgage. So I don't make any money for 5 years. My payment's $667. They're paying $875, but I'm also covering the taxes and insurance. So I don't make any money. They generally put $3,000 to $5,000 down, which you could take that. It is made money, but I always tell my people, leave it in the account. So if it's ever vacant again, you don't have to come out of pocket. So now they pay you for 30 years, $875 a month. So you basically got the house for free. You've got a house, somebody else funded it. The first 5 years, you didn't make anything. And now for the next 25 years, or more likely than not, forever, because the average length of stay in America in a home is 5.5 years. So odds are they are either going to sell it, which you hope they do, and pay you back 3 times what you paid for it, or they're going to move out and give you back the keys. So either way, it's fine. It'll keep recycling. And so I always say it's for 30 years, but really it's been forever. It's something that 99% of the time will go on forever. So you took no money at all and created $667. You paid out $667.33, and then you created $875 coming into you forever if you just stick out the first 5 years.
That's it. So a couple of things that you mentioned there that has my brain spinning, and I'm sure a couple of our listeners they may be thinking the same way. First of all, how are you getting around the Dodd-Frank Act with this?
Great question. So now everything I'm about to tell you has not been challenged. Dodd-Frank has not challenged anybody yet. So I have searches on Google, as I'm sure you do, to see if any investor ever got any kind of anything with Dodd-Frank, so we can see what's going on with it. But the way I interpret it is you're allowed to do 3 deals without worrying about it. 3 deals per year. There's a question of whether it's 3 deals per year per entity or just 3 years per deal per year period. We don't know the answer to that. But right. The biggest way we get some lawyers say it's per entity. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense because you can have 100 entities. So why even do that? But again, nothing's been tested. But one thing that is a fact is it only applies to homeowners. It does not apply. It applies to, if I sell to a homeowner, it doesn't apply if I sell to an investor. And so after Dodd-Frank came out, we've repositioned our entire business to, we sell these to investors. We sell them to 2005, Scott. In 2005, I would have bought all of them. I would have bought anything. Somebody would own a finance that I can make $100, $200 a month cash flow. I was the buyer back in 2005 until I learned a hard lesson in 2007. Well, there's plenty. And when I say plenty, I mean pretty much everybody outside of my group of people still subscribes to that method of doing, correct? Yep. The other seminars, let's talk about the big boxes that come in, and you know them. I don't have to mention their names. You see them every day. They fly into town every week and put on a seminar in your town. They train people to be our customer.
Yep.
They literally train them. They train them to own a finance, find a low down payment, make a monthly cash flow. They train them to buy from me. I have, and I didn't tell your listeners this yet, I have 113 of them now. 113 slow flips. 47 of them are paid off already. The rest of them will be paid off at some point within the next 5 years. Every month, I have a list over here as they get paid off. So every month, there's another one, and sometimes it's 3 months with none, and then there'll be one. But I have 113 of them. 47 are paid off, and they'll all be paid off within 5 years. That
Love
doesn't
it,
suck.
man.
Yeah, that doesn't suck. And
Not
it's
at
the
all.
opposite of what everyone teaches. The absolute opposite. So I'm going to go over a couple things, questions you didn't ask, only because I know people listening would ask about it.
Yep.
These are low-end properties, right? Nobody wants low-end properties. So, well, you don't want to deal with low-end properties. It's a bad element.
Now let's define low end real quick. So when you say low end, are you buying hood houses?
Some are.
Okay.
So I try and buy the best of the worst. So yeah, some of them are, but my rules are this. So my rule number one is I don't buy anywhere where I don't feel safe.
Gotcha.
So if I feel like I'm not getting out of my car here, I don't care if the house is $5,000, let's go. You know what I mean? If it's that bad where I'm nervous, then let's just go. I don't need another house. The second thing is I like it to be somewhat livable. It doesn't have to be move-in ready, but I like it to be somewhat livable. But that's not always the case. I bought them with no kitchen. I bought them with no bathrooms. If it's a good enough deal, I'll still do it.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple things. So I was going to talk about it's low end. So we call it real estate purgatory. And what I mean by that is these are houses nobody wants. That's why we can get these deals. Nobody wants them for two reasons. One is the flippers, right? The rehabbers. They don't flip out there because there's no retail sales.
Right.
There's no retail sales. That's it. It's a rental market and people own them that live in them, but there is no retail sales. Landlords is the other part of the market. Well, landlords don't want them because it's the worst possible rental you can ever have. They're lower month. You're going to max out at about $875 to $975 a month. So they're lower rents and the highest headache. You have the lower end tenant, which means they're going to want everything repaired. They're going to be the most evictions, the most taking care of everything. So landlords don't want them and rehabbers don't want them. Well, that's opportunity. So wholesalers get them. And this is where we were going with, where do you find them? Wholesalers get them and can't get rid of them. They contract it and now they're stuck with it because all the rehabbers say no and all the landlords say no. Until me or one of the people in my group come along, we'll take it because it's free for us. We see a good one. I mean, I have some I paid $17,000 for. I sold for $89,000. It was in rough shape. I go back to see it and it's completely renovated, brand new house.
Yeah.
Because we're selling to investors and they're spending the money rehabbing them, making them into brand new houses so they can rent them, so they can make their $200 a month or whatever it may be and go on with their lives. And not to get into a whole thing on rentals, but let me tell you, this is how I generally start off this segment. I tell people that I call it the great rental myth. And what that myth is people think, if it's $300 a month, they always say, try and make $300 a month. That's a, good cash flow. The reality, and since this is in two ways, so none of you people listening can argue with me, which is good. The reality is, on average, you end up spending about $300 a month maintaining a property.
Yep.
Now people always argue and they're like, no, I've had this property 3 years. I haven't done one thing. And they're right. They're not lying. Or I haven't had a repair in 6 months, or I only spent $1,000 this whole year. They're not lying. But what happens is a year, 2 years, 3 years go by and now it's a turnover. And when it's a turnover, you have to paint, carpet, replace the air conditioner, whatever you have to do. And you end up spending $3,000 and you average it out. And you're like, it comes out. I've done the math and I have very analytical friends with tons of rentals and we've gone tracking them and it averages about $300 a month over the course of time.
Wow.
So for us, maintenance is zero. For the guy who bought it from us and he's like, oh, I'm going to spend this money and I just want to make my $300 a month. 2005, Scott, he's doing exactly what I did. For him, that's exactly the way he's been trained. That's what he wants to do. Long-term, make this little spread. And so what I've come to realize is that 30 years is a long damn time.
Oh, yeah.
5 years I can do standing on my head. 30 years is a long time. When someone talks about you can buy this with a 30-year mortgage, I'm like, just don't even talk to me any further. 30 years is a long time. I have to be able to pay the house off in 5 years or I don't want it.
Now, you mentioned something about taking out private funds to do this. I kind of do the same thing with a twist. I've been using a lot of creative strategies to do pretty much the same exact thing that you're doing.
With the seller funding it?
With the seller funding it or taking over the seller's debt or whatever the case may be. So I utilize those types of strategies. The benefit of having access to capital is you really don't have to negotiate too much. I mean, it's a cash deal. Now, on the flip side of that, I don't sell with owner finance. I sell with a lease with an option to purchase.
Right. I used to do that.
Mm-hmm. So what made you change?
I lost in court.
You lost in
Simple
court.
as that. Yeah. So I always did lease options and I did them for years and I liked them. And then I had one court case where the lady came in with all these receipts. Mind you, they were all fake,
Right.
stating she did all this work to the property and she didn't. But even if she did, the contract was she's responsible for all repairs. Well, the judge's words, and I remembered them always, was he ruled in her favor. Mind you, it was district court. And if you got to circuit court, they actually follow the law. District court, they do whatever they want. But his words to me, which I always remembered, is he said you had to have the benefits and burdens transferring together. You can't give them all the burdens and you keep all the benefits. And the way I had my lease options written was exactly, I had all the benefit and you had all the burdens.
Right.
If it was a roof, I'm watching my mouth not to say what they said, Goodfellas, but he said, screw you, pay me. There's, that somebody stole your air conditioner, screw you, pay me. Yeah. Whatever it was, I wanted all the benefit. I don't care what happened, you pay me. However, the burdens, they're all yours. And so the judge was pretty much telling me we had to transfer the benefits and burdens together. So that's when I switched over to doing a full 30-year land contract.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like the way I do it, the people who move into my houses, they are responsible for repairing the entire house. They're responsible for taking care of everything. They give me a huge down payment, and I stick to the same numbers. I'm buying them between that $30,000 and $50,000 price. I was just talking to Ron LeGrand, and he does something similar, but he doesn't touch anything under like $250,000. My problem with that is, especially in my market, I can clean up. I'm actually cleaning up with the lower end houses, and they're not necessarily hood houses. And a hood house here would cost maybe around $10,000 or $15,000, where I'm buying in the 30 to 50, sometimes up to 100, depending on the type of house that I'm buying and the area that I'm buying in. Majority of the houses that we're doing these types of deals on are $30,000 to $50,000. If we start getting into the hundreds, then we start getting into rehab style properties or even wholesale deals. So I love this model a lot, man. So your main reason for stopping with preventing doing lease options is because you lost in court?
And yes, and there's a law, and I know Virginia law, so I don't know North Carolina or the rest of wherever anyone's listening, but in our law, and I'm sure it's probably every state, we have the Landlord-Tenant Act.
Yeah.
And so the Landlord-Tenant Act says on a lease option, you're still the landlord.
Right.
And the landlord is responsible to provide heat, and the landlord is responsible to have flushing toilets, regardless of what's written in your paperwork. It doesn't matter. The law exists. You can't write up a contract to say, please disregard the law. I agree. The law doesn't apply to me. You can't do that. The law is the law.
Right.
And so I didn't know that. I thought, well, no, my contract says you're responsible for everything, until I got to court. And they're like, no, the Landlord-Tenant Act says they must have heat, and you're the landlord. You're responsible for providing them with heat.
Right. Right.
Mad. And
that's understandable.
I met with lawyers and I said, all right, how do I get around all this? And that's what we came up with. Long-term owner financing.
Long-term owner finance. Now, and that prevents the Dodd-Frank, you're not too concerned about that either. So that's perfect.
Because we're selling to investors. If you sell to homeowners, it would still apply after you pass 3 in a year.
Exactly.
But sell to investors, it doesn't apply. So my issue with Ron's thing, and Ron, obviously it works really well what Ron does. He's been doing it for probably longer than anybody. But it wasn't meaning him, but meaning the $250,000 houses is there's more cash flow, and they're a lot easier to maintain. They're a lot easier to deal with people and all this and that. But you can't do my new model, which is free and clear. You can, but it's even if you pay an extra $1,000 a month, you're talking 250 months to get it paid off.
Yeah.
It's going to always be a cash flow model, not a free and clear model.
Right. I love it, man. I love that model that you're using with the slow flips, and you're making money over time. So, just like what I do, I get money up front, money every month, and then money if they ever decide to, like you said, most people stay in the house for about 5 years. So if they close out, you make money on the back end.
Right.
Well, perfect. That's what real estate investing is all about, in my opinion. A lot of people get too caught up trying to be a wholesaler and don't get me wrong, wholesaling is great, right? But a lot of people get way too caught up in.
Well, you almost have to do both, because like if you start slow flips today, you're not going to make $1 for 5 years.
Right.
You got bills to pay next month. So you have to do both. You got,
right.
My students are all, they're wholesaling and slow flipping.
I just did a video recently on how, people they become too one-dimensional in their real estate investing businesses. And what I mean by that is they put their backs up against the wall and they focus only on wholesaling. That's the only craft that they learn. You have to think outside the box. You got to do wholesaling. You got to do some creative stuff. You got to be able to hold on and build some passive or residual income in this business. And that's how you make it as a real estate investor, in my opinion. So I love it, man.
Answer 2 questions you didn't ask for your listeners' sake. Because I know this is what people ask, right? So one of the questions people always ask is, what about the condition? When you're spending 30 grand or 25 grand or 17 grand, they're not in great shape, so So what about when the person comes to look at the house and they're like, but the window's cracked. Are you going to replace that? Or there's no kitchen. Are you going to put a new kitchen in? And my answer is always no, and you're lucky. And I always word it this way. I say, like they're like, oh, are you going to put a new kitchen in? And I'd be like, no, and you're lucky we didn't do it yet, because you can probably get it done for a couple grand. But if we do it, it's going to probably cost 15 grand, and you're going to have to pay that additional down payment. And they're like, no, we'll take care of it. Or, are you going to clean up the trash on the floor? And I say, no, and you're lucky we didn't do it yet, because our guy charges $400 or $500, but I'm sure your kids can do it for nothing. You'd be done in no time. And they're like, no, don't do anything. We'll take it as is. And so that's number one. I always tell them, you're lucky we didn't do anything. And I don't do anything. I close on it. I sell it exactly as it sits. The second thing is the price. And I just want to address it, because I know if people never heard this, they're going to be like, well, if you're buying it for 30 grand, how could you sell it for 89 grand, right? Especially in houses with no retail sales. So there's not really any comps to support it. How could you sell it for, that price? How do you come up with that price? And my short answer is I make it up. And it's true. I do. I make it up. However, before people think, oh, that's horrible of you, every price everywhere is made up. That's it. That's how someone comes up with a price. Now, mind you, they have to back it up with numbers, with an appraisal. But the ones they're backing it up with is, again, something else somebody made up. Anything is worth what someone's willing to pay.
Right.
Period. So I answer that question in two different ways. So first off, I will say, they sit their pocketbook on the desk when we're doing the paperwork, and they'll be like, well, how'd you come up with 89,000? And I'll tell them exactly like I just told you. I said, well, anything is worth what someone's willing to pay for it. And this house will be sold by next week. I said, you see your purse right there? You can buy a purse at Walmart for $30, or you can buy one at Louis Vuitton for $2,000. Does it make it worth $2,000? Well, yeah, because someone's willing to pay it. I said, otherwise they couldn't get away with selling it. They can sell it because someone will come in and pay it. Well, someone's going to pay me 89 grand. Doesn't have to be you. Someone's going to pay 89 grand, so therefore it's worth 89 grand. That's right. The way any value is created, what someone's willing to pay. The second thing is when people say, well, there's one listed right up the road for 40 grand, or there's one, there's a bank owned right next door for 35 grand or whatever it may be. My answer to that is, well, I would buy that one. And they're like, yeah, but that one you got to pay cash. Well, then I would buy mine. Yeah, but that one's only 35 grand. Well, then I would buy that one. And I lay it out for them. So I'm not trying to pull anything over on anybody. I let them know, hey, if that's a better deal, I suggest you buy that one. But you need 35 grand in cash to buy that one. This one, you only need the 3 grand down. And they end up with me, but this way you're not hiding anything. You're not trying to tell them some story about why yours is worth more. I tell them, no, this is it.
And you're dealing with investors, so they understand the game. Plus, most of the time investors are willing to pay a little bit more, especially if they don't.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So I love it, man. So if you had to give let's say a 3-step process for our listeners to go out and get started in slow flipping, what would be those 3 steps?
I don't know specific 3 steps, but first and foremost is you have to learn your markets. You have to do marketing. You have to market. The easy way I tell this to people all the time is I say, we might be in real estate, but we are in a marketing business. If you're not marketing, you're not in business.
That's right.
Simple as that. You have to do marketing. We're in a marketing business. So if you think to yourself, if you're going to stop marketing, if you're a wholesaler and you're like, I'm going to stop marketing, well, you might as well say, I'm going to shut down my business, because that's the lifeblood of your business. I'm not doing any marketing now, but my wholesaling is a side thing. I do, I have other things that are my main business, my wholesaling, and deals come to me, I do them. But you have to continue marketing. You have to know your market. You have to continue marketing. And then you have to pull the trigger. Don't, this is something I hate to even say with you, because you do coaching, but it sounds self-serving, but people need to invest in themselves and pay for coaching, or pay for somebody, some mentor, some trainer, somebody who's done this before and can cut off the 10, 20, 30 years learning curve and take them right to the finish line. So many people, you read online, people are like, oh, I would never pay. I'm like, well, then don't pay. And 30 years later, you're going to still be figuring the crap out.
That's mind-boggling to me. I mean, I'm not going to mention any websites or anything like that. They're just not educator-friendly websites. And then you have people who are upset. I get it. Some guys are out there teaching this stuff and they don't know what the heck they're talking about. I get it.
I still go to groups. I pay a lot of money for. I pay a lot a money. Exactly. I'm still in groups. I'm still in mastermind groups, and I still pay for coaching.
I just joined one. I spent $10,000 on one. For 2 meetings for the entire year. 2 meetings. But it's not about the money. It's about the benefit of being in that group. A lot of people. If you look at successful individuals who've been doing it for a while, they understand, they get it. They understand that you have to invest money into your craft and into yourself in order to improve on what you're doing. At the end of the day, those who are not investing into their education, like you said, they're going to be broke in 10 years anyway, so it doesn't even matter.
Or, you can do it without investing, but
You can.
spend that time rather than
Yeah.
you have it all figured out in a year. You're 10 years from later, you're still going to be figuring it out. So 10
Yep.
years from now with the trained model, you could be a bird flew away and you're on your own and you have your full retirement, everything's set up and everything's beautiful. The other model, you're still struggling, learning as you go every month.
Yep.
You can do it without training. It's just the time is what you're saving. By
I've
paying
done
for
both.
someone else's mistakes, you're saving all that time.
Yep, I've done both, man. So I get it. I
Me
know
too.
I've done it, and you've done it as well. So
Yeah.
we understand.
I would never have paid. When I was younger, I went to events I never would have paid in a million years.
Yep.
As an older person now, I so regret it. I'm like,
Yeah.
God, I could have been so much further along if I was just not skeptical enough. I was willing to do it. I would have been
Yep.
so much further along. But however, now, so say I started here and now I'm here. Well, now I pay so I can get here. Now I see the value and I know the value and I'm like, nope, I pay the money now. And I regret not doing it when I was younger, but you live and you learn.
Exactly, man. I love that, the fact that you brought that out, because a lot of people just don't get it. And then, I've had people invest the money and not do anything after that. Or they'll expect you as meaning me as a coach, to do it for them. It doesn't work that way. How are you supposed to learn your craft?
But this is the worst part. Even if you did it for them, right? And you did it all for them and they got a check, right? You still didn't help them at all. Now they still don't know what to do with the rest of their life. They don't know how to do the business.
Exactly.
So even if you did do the whole thing for them, you did them a disservice, because now they didn't learn anything and they still don't know how to do the business.
Right. So it's all about not only investing into your education, but also getting out there and getting the work done. I'm glad you brought that up, man. Key point that a lot of people, if you're serious about real estate investing, you need to take that tip and really think about it. I'm not saying that you guys are like that individually. What I'm saying is this is feedback that we've gotten from being educators for years in this space and also being in the business ourselves as well. So slow flipping is definitely something that you guys should look into. I personally love the business model because it builds capital up front, capital every month, and capital on the back end. I love business models that fit that model. And I'm not saying that wholesaling doesn't work. I'm saying that you need to incorporate other business models outside of wholesaling and take advantage of both worlds in a sense.
And wholesaling works, but you have to do it every month. If you don't work this month, you don't get paid.
Only as good as your last deal.
Set it up and set it and forget it. I'm gonna tell you one last thing, and again, I know it's a question you didn't ask, but I just provide value for you people listening. So one of the things I tell people, when most people don't realize what they even want, right? So we think we want a fancy Lamborghini and we think we want all this stuff, but we really don't. What most people really want, and I can't speak for everybody, is simply freedom, money freedom and time freedom.
Time and freedom, man.
So with that said, I have an exercise I have my people do, and I'm sure you probably do it with yours, where we have them create their future vision of what they want their perfect day, perfect week, perfect month to look like. If you can do anything you want, you don't have to worry about money, you don't have to worry about failing. What would you want your day or month to look like? So your people can do this as well, but then put a number next to it. What would this cost per month to live this perfect vision you just created? Most of the time, and you're going to be shocked at how low these numbers are, most of the time, it's about $10,000 a month.
That's it.
People think they need 50 grand and 100 grand and all these crazy numbers. On average, people actually need about $10,000 a month. So with that number in mind, it means at max, you need 20 slow flips. And so if you were to start today and really push it, and my two top students for slow flips, one did 23 and one did 21 in 1 year, starting from last January to this December, 23 and 21 in 1 year each that they own now. They're not making money off them right now, but in 5 years, they're all paid off. That's that future vision that we just talked about. They did in 1 year. If you commit and do this, and it doesn't have to take you a year. It can take you 3 years, 5 years. It doesn't matter. And you say, I'm getting these 20, so I'm going to live this. And then from the time you buy your last one, you have 5 years till the last one's paid off. You can live that absolute future vision without wholesaling. Not to say don't wholesale, but without doing all the other stuff, just from your slow flips. You can say, I'm not going in this month. I'm going to hang out by the pool, or I'm just going to go walk the earth and go hang out at the beach, or whatever it is you want to do. And you have the same money coming in every month, so you could live that ideal future vision.
So I know you're paying right around a little less than $1,000 a month per slow flip, right?
What do you mean paying?
Well,
you mean the payment?
Your payment is around $667, but your tenant
$667.33, yeah.
But when you owner finance them, your let's say your tenant Well, not necessarily a tenant,
They
but
pay on average $875.
$875. So you're taking that entire $875 and putting it in for 5 years.
No, I still just make the payment because they're not a bank. They're just private lenders. So I still make the payment. But then with the difference, we leave it in the account because you are responsible for the taxes and insurance.
Got it.
You can make it so they pay their own, and I used to, but you know as well as I do what happens. They don't pay it.
Yep.
And then if and when you get the house back, now you got $3-5 grand you owe and you have to pay it.
Yep.
So now I pay it myself.
That's it. Got it. Understood, man. Great call, man. Great information. Is there anything else that we're leaving out?
No, I think we got pretty much everything covered. I like sharing this with people because certain people get it. Some people hate it. I'm going to tell you right now, there's probably some people listening right now that they're in their head, they're going, slumlord, I would never do that. And, and all these negative things about it. My people who do it, and you see how much you're changing people's lives. I mean, and these investors that couldn't buy otherwise are now buying a bunch of properties. They're fixing them up. Families are in them, loving them. You're changing the whole neighborhoods. There's all good that comes with it while you're making a ton of money. So the people that get it become obsessed with it.
Right.
I love talking to these people because I mean, we have some people, again, I told you, we have people in our group that did basically a lifetime's worth of work they did in 1 year. And now if they do nothing more, 4 years from now, they'll all be paid off. And
you're selling these at 5% down. You're selling
not 5%. I do $3 to $5 grand.
$3 to $5 grand down
as a down payment.
And you're specifically marketing to investors.
Specifically marketing to investors. Every now and then we get some homeowners in, but again, you're allowed to do up to 3 homeowners per year, so it's not a big deal. So every now and then we'll get some homeowners depending on the property. So I'm going to tell you one other thing, and I keep getting off topic, but you just mentioned the 875. And so for those of you who have never seen an amortization schedule, right? And if you guys own your own home, I'm sure you know what it is. You mailed in $1,000, you borrowed $100,000, you mailed in $1,000, and then the next month you see only $35 came off the balance. What the hell? I mailed in $1,000. Well, that's the amortization schedule. So on these loans that we sell, $89,000, they pay $875 a month for 30 years. In 30 years, they end up paying us back $315,000. On a house we bought for 30, we end up getting back $315,000.
10 times the money.
I share that with you to let you know in any city, and in yours included, I don't know if you're right in Charlotte or you're outside of it, but in any city, go look at the tall buildings, and they all have bank names on the side and insurance companies. And the reason is they're doing exactly what we're doing. But in this case, we're the bank. That's it. Everyone else is running around, going to work, dealing with all the headache, and then mailing the check up to the bank. Our people are doing the exact same thing, but they're mailing the check to us.
And you know what, it's interesting that you said that, and that I love the fact that you bridge that gap. When you're borrowing private, let's take a step back. Banks take your money and they lend it out at a higher interest rate. That's how they make money, right? What you're doing is taking private funds and then you're buying these properties, and then in essence, you're creating these mortgages or lending it out at a higher interest rate. So you're basically playing the bank's game.
Exactly the same thing. And people ask me about houses sometimes. I said, I sometimes will drive by and buy them. They're like, well, what was the inside? I said, doesn't matter. I know exactly what I can get regardless of worst case scenario. I look at, sometimes wholesalers will put out a deal and I'll just look at the pictures and respond, I'll take it. They're like, when do you want to see it? I don't need to see it. I'm good. And because I'm not doing any work to it anyway. I'm not worried about it after, a retail sale.
That's it.
Yeah.
So you got a book on Amazon. What's the name of the book?
Work Just Gets in the Way of Making Money. And so let me tell you something about that real quick. So it's on Amazon and it's called Work Just Gets in the Way of Making Money. But the reason, I want to clarify one thing, the name was never meant to imply that this business does not take work. I get a lot of people who think that's what I mean by that. And the reality is, for years, people would always ask me, how do I get started? How can you teach me how to do what you do? And, and this and that. And then when I start telling them what they need to do, they almost always would respond with, well, that's easy for you. You don't have a job. And I remember I'm always thinking, you hear what you're saying? You're too busy working to make any money. And so I always said I'm going to write a book and call it Work Just Gets in the Way of Making Money. It really should have been Your Job Gets in the Way of You Making Money, but I didn't like the way that sounded as much. Right. So it was never meant to imply this business does not take work. We absolutely work.
Absolutely, man. I love it. I'm going to link Scott's book. If you're listening to this on a podcast, you can go to Amazon and check out Work Just Gets in the Way of Making Money. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to go ahead and link Scott's book in the description so that you guys can just click on it and go ahead and grab a copy of it. Definitely worth getting. And is it all about slow flips?
It's not all about slow flips. I go through everything. We always say the 5 pillars of real estate investing. It's marketing, wholesale, rehabs, rentals, and raising private money. So we basically cover all of it.
Got it. Perfect, man. So it's almost like a home study course in a box, all in a book. I love it, man. And if our listeners wanted to get some more information on you or get to know you a little better, what should they do?
You know, I'm not an online type of guy, so you can Google me, Scott Jelinek, or, you Facebook, Instagram. I'm on YouTube. I got a ton of videos on YouTube or, Instagram or Facebook. So
let's just say they go to YouTube. It'll be at Scott Jelinek, or what is it?
No, it's Master Investor One. Master Investor One. But if you just type in Scott Jelinek, it'll pop right up.
Gotcha. Guys, definitely check Scott out. He's a master real estate investor who's running the Master Investors Academy. Is it the Master Investors Academy?
Master Investor Academy.
Master Investor Academy, killing it in his market. Obviously, you
have listeners that are somewhat local to me because I only do the events in my local market. Our next event is coming up at the end of February. If anybody wants to come, shoot me a message and I'll get you set up. It's going to be at the end of February.
So how should they get in contact with you?
They can email me if you want. Scott@uglyscott.com is my email address. Scott@uglyscott.com. It's because of my charming good looks.
You might get a lot of people emailing you. So definitely don't spam Scott, but definitely contact him if you're interested in receiving information about his event. I went and hung out with him for a couple of days at one of his last ones a few years ago. And the event, definitely Scott is a class act. And the event is phenomenal, I got to tell you. But you'll learn everything that you need to know about real estate investing. And in addition to that, you're going to learn more about the slow flips. I actually still have that book that you gave me inside my office as well, man. So, but definitely slow flips is the way to go if you want to build long-term wealth. Like Scott said, not saying you don't want to wholesale houses. You definitely need to wholesale houses, but you also want to build long-term wealth. In my opinion, wholesaling, you're only as good as your last deal. So wholesaling is like a high-paying job. Slow flips is building real wealth where you can eventually stop working one day. So you need both. As you know, you want to be balanced in your real estate investing business in order to be successful. And that's what this podcast was all about. Really appreciate having you, man.
Thank you for having me. I had a good time.
We got to catch up a little bit more as well, man.
Yeah, I know you got a new baby. I haven't seen you in ages.
Yeah. I got to take a trip out to Virginia. I'm actually going to be going out to Houston in a couple of weeks. Maybe sometime after that, I'll give you a call and we'll see if we can get up and grab a couple beers or something.
Sounds good. Look forward to it.
Awesome, man. It's been a real pleasure, guys. And it's been a pleasure having you, Scott, and looking forward to having you again sometime in the future, man.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for having me.